Our next paper will be by Thomas Klein from Georgia Southern University, who will be telling us about divergent processes in Gullah, Geechee, evidence from sound structure. There'll be a handout coming around.
Okay, as a preliminary, I'd like to characterize Gullah Geechee. I call it the only true blue English lexified Creole language spoken indigenously in the continental United States, namely in the coastal areas of Georgia and South Carolina. The naming of the variety that I'm using here fuses the two locally preferred names for the language, that is Geechee in Georgia and in Charleston, South Carolina, and Gullah in the rest of South Carolina. Sian Creole, which you may have heard as a designation in scholarly work, I don't use it because it suggests that it's only spoken in the Sea Islands, whereas in fact it's spoken inland as well, in Georgia's so-called coastal empire and South Carolina low country. The central question that drives this paper is, can a distinct structure of an indigenous minority language, in our case a Creole language, survive under the challenge of the encroaching dominance of English? Evidence has been presented to answer these questions, and the evidence falls into a short list of classes. One answer was that Gullah Geechee would be converging with vernacular English. Other evidence has suggested that instead its maintenance, the distinct structures of it are maintained, whereas yet other evidence has suggested that even new or divergent patterns may develop. Now, previous work is mostly focused on the morphosyntax here. What I'm trying to do, obviously, from the title of the paper suggests that is trying to look at phonology here, sound patterns. What am I using as data sources? First, the phonetically transcribed narratives in Turner's Africanisms, and in Jones-Jackson's dissertation, one narrative was reprinted in When Woods Die as well, her 87th book. And secondly, this was not announced in the abstract, I'm using historic audio recordings. What I'm finding or rediscovering here is that Indiana University Archives of Traditional Music have the complete corpus of the original audio field recordings from 1932 and 1933 that were done by Turner himself. We're looking at around 18 hours of speech here, over 200 tracks ranging in length anywhere from a minute, minute and a half to about 5 minutes, including all of the narratives labeled Gullah texts transcribed in Turner 49 on pages 260 to 289. We're going to only have as examples a few very short passages from the Turner collection here. So the aims for the paper are to investigate the complex dynamics involved in the status of the structure of Gullah from the perspective of phonology rather than morphosyntax, to present evidence of previously unreported or uninvestigated sound patterns in Gullah Geechee, to name aphesis, nasal velarization, and the monophthongization and raising of the correlate of English owl. And finally, to initiate a scholarly comparison of the originals of Turner's audio recordings with what was published in the narratives and the appendix to his most famous book. Now, when we turn to aphesis, which we define as the omission or variable omission of unstressed word initial syllables, we of course note that this to a certain degree is part of any vernacular variety of English. However, the frequency and lexical conditions may vary, therefore may co-define a given variety. Less aphesis here is interpreted as being towards the standard end of the curriculum, more standard English, whereas more aphesis we find in vernaculars or Creole languages. Now, as far as aphesis in Gullah Geechee is concerned, aphesis variants were transcribed but not discussed in Turner's original work or in Jones-Jackson's work. We find some variation there in Turner's materials. Now, let's see, the first track I already... You Will Take Your Hoe in Your Hand Again from 1932.
You take your hoe in your hand again.
what we need to listen for here is the presence of the schwa syllable in the English word again. I think it's quite clear that it's there, as transcribed in Turner. I'll play it again. Okay. Now this is variable, so that we have this is variable. So we find in Turner transcribe about for about, and we can now with the original audio recordings check how accurate he was. So here we need to take a piece of plank about so wide.
Take a piece of plank about so wide.
Okay. I'll be bothered that I'm not hearing a schwa syllable in here. It's plank about so wide. Plank about so wide.
Take a piece of plank about so wide.
So it appears that I, of course, listened to much more in the material here, did more comparison. It appears that Turner's transcription of the thesis is exact and reliable. On rare occasion, there seems to be no token in the original audio recordings where the published transcription claims there to be one. Table 1 shows the phasic variance from the Gullah text published in Turner 4090. What we find certainly is a qualitative difference. Some variance we know from varieties of English, such as not or suppose, whereas others seem impossible in English. So backup for tobacco, pen for depend, examine for examine. As far as the quantity is concerned, Table 2 shows the distribution of pieces across the two sources here. What we have here is a significant distributional difference in the sense that we have more retention, that is, more initial unstressed syllables being produced in Turner's data, whereas we have more omission, that is, fewer initial unstressed syllables produced in Jackson's data. This appears to be a change in real time because in both sources we have older speakers, 60 plus years. Many occasions in Turner's data he uses folks in their 80s or their 90s. So what we seem to be finding here is a divergent pattern in the sense that we have an increase in a thesis creating distance to general American English. I think I want to skip the comparison here with what we have on African American vernacular English for reasons of time. Mostly it's in there because, of course, we can ask the question, well, where does this come from, this increase in the thesis? And one candidate, one plausible candidate to look for would, of course, be African American vernacular English. Because this is a group where Gullah Geechee speakers interact with more than any other group on a meaningful level anyway, and because their identity is at least partially shared. But I'm going to skip that part here for reasons of time. Okay, there's an interesting finding concerning gender distribution as far as a thesis is concerned. We know from earlier work that the speech of women is more Creole-like for Gullah Geechee. And of course, the correspondent here that the speech of men is more acrolectal. However, very recent observations indicate that this doesn't seem to be the case everywhere. So, Cook et al. Report greater Creoleness of men's speech.